good to be back.
To be back. Holiday season is upon us. That's what I hear.
That word on the street.
The word on the streets is that it's cold and rainy and slightly miserable. So it must be in the holidays.
You know what I love about cold weather? Not a lot. However, I do love turtleneck season.
God, you fucking loved, and you have loved turtlenecks. That's because Steve Jobs is your style inspiration.
He is. And what's her face?
Elizabeth Theros. What's her name?
No, Theros was her thing. Elizabeth Holmes.
Elizabeth Holmes. That's who the fuck knows.
We should get it together. Also, I have like a very long neck. One time my mom's friend said, you have the neck of a goose. I was like, it was like in 7th grade, when you feel real insecure about yourself to begin with. She said, you have the neck of a goose. I said, that's kind. Thank you. Was she wrong?
Never have I looked at you and I'm like, wow, you know what that girl's got? Big ass neck. Like never have I never thought about your neck. I've never looked at your neck. I have never. Is that why you always talk about your hair trauma to distract from your neck trauma?
I think they're intertwined in a way. They're like one and the same.
The neck of a goose.
Who says that to a 7th grader? Just who says that? That's why I love turtleneck season.
That's another reminder this holiday season, folks. Don't fucking comment on anyone else's body. There's no need to.
There it is. There's the
whether you think it's silly or not, and whether you think you're being a silly goose or not.
I am a silly goose
with the neck of one.
Silly goose neck. I'm sorry, I really threw us off course. But we have a question today from one of our Emmalee gets about my gooseneck. We have an amazing question.
I can't believe you've never told me this story before.
I like to surprise you at the beginning of our episodes for new. And I just thought about it today because I thought about wearing a turtleneck and I thought, well, why do I like turtlenecks so much? Number 1, Steve Jobs. Number 2, Elizabeth Holmes. Number 3, long gooseneck. So
Molly wrote in.
So Molly asked an amazing question. Emmalee knows my answer to this, but we're still going to answer it for everyone. What was the first concert you ever went to?
Do you know what mine was? Mine's amazing.
I feel like you're going to tell me and I'm going to be like, that's amazing. Okay, tell me.
Cher.
Oh, that is amazing. That's a really good one.
My parents took me and my friend to Cher.
How old were you?
First concert ever. I don't know. Young, probably like 11 or 12.
Oh.
And then after my second concert was that this is also going to blow your mind, was Q Concert 12. Q Concert 12. Remember Q concerts? Like Q102?
Q102, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I won the tickets, of course, because I was doing my homework at night and I fucking called in with the top 5 songs of the night and I'm on the phone. It's hysterical. I mean, you would have thought I won $3 billion. My behavior was so insane. And then they like put you on this other line, like, how old are you? And I was like, I'm under 18. My mom is here. Like
you were so excited. Okay. But I have to say, there's something about you where you win things all the time.
All the time.
And as your friend, I'm really jealous.
It's rude, right?
It's really rude. And I would like you to throw me some of those things.
But wait, I have this story. One time I was I went to, I don't know if I've told this story before. I went to Penn State. Like Penn State, the first few years of your classes at Penn State, they're in massive lecture halls, right? So like when later when you're in your specialty and your major, they're smaller. But at the beginning, you're in like 300-person lecture halls for like every fucking class, right? And so I was in class with my best friend Brielle, my best friend to this day. And I look at her and there's pumpkins on the front. And she's like, oh, they're like, we're going to do a attendance raffle. And I look at Brielle and I said, fucking T out of these 300 people, I win that fucking pumpkin. What do you think happened? I won that
We're-
fucking pumpkin. Then I had to carry that goddamn thing all
I
the
was
way.
just gonna say, I don't know if that's a great thing to win.
It was not, but I am telling you, I was like, I win everything.
You really do. That would make me never go to class again, right? Like, why is that reinforcing attendance for you to carry around a gigantic pumpkin? That literally
I
would be the
know.
last thing
It
I
was the
wanted
day
to
of
win.
Halloween. It was Halloween.
Right. Still,
I don't know if that makes that better or worse.
no,
But
I'd be
at the time,
pissed.
it was more just like, oh, look at
It's
this. Watch me. I'm magical.
We also went to our wonderful friend, Dr. Z. We went to her she had like a book party, and there was this like huge gift. We were doing a raffle and Emmalee won it again.
Wait, and it was Botox.
I know.
It was like $250 to a hair salon, $250 to clothing, and then like $250 Botox. And I won it. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so that was my first concert, but Cher was my first one. So that is an amazing first concert.
Agreed. And
Yes.
I would also say mine is up there. Alanis Morissette, who I just really want to come on the podcast because I really just want to chat with
We've
her.
tried.
I'm a big fan.
We've tried.
I know.
You are a huge fan of
Just
Alanis
love her
Morissette.
so much. She was at the Psychotherapy Networker.
Do you cry when you saw her?
Almost.
I thought you did cry. I'm gonna be honest. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, I cry pretty easily. I cry pretty easily.
I didn't go. I laid on the couch.
Yeah, but it was.
Jen was there 3 hours early.
I was. I was like a groupie at the Psychotherapy Networker. But I was 6 years old.
Holy shit! I don't think I realized that part of the story. You were 6 years old.
My parents brought us when I was 6 years old.
Because they loved Alanis Morissette, or because at 6
Yeah.
you loved her so much?
No, I think they loved her, and then it turned me into
Oh.
like the,
Where
like,
was it at?
grungy. I have no idea. Like,
Yeah,
do you ever
remember?
do you ever know where you are at 6
Well,
years old? No.
I don't know, but I know it was like a story your parents had, and like they knew the owner
No.
of this cool nightclub. And,
No,
a bunch of shit.
no.
Okay.
It was like she was very famous at that point. It was that like a yeah.
I'm just assuming you're 1 million years old, so that makes
I
sense to me.
am. I mean,
Yes,
I am.
that's what I thought. Hey, today episode, we're going to do a whole bunch of Dear Em and Jen. At the end of the year, we have so many Dear Em and Gems we never got to. We know everyone writes this up. They're so vulnerable when they write in, and we want to try to get through a few of the next few episodes because we want people write these in and they want us to answer. And I'm so sorry if we didn't get to yours, and we're going to try to get to what we can today.
The thing that I wanted to say too, I don't know if we've ever announced this. If you're listening to this and you're wondering, how do I submit a question? How do I submit a Dear Em and Jen? You follow us on Instagram at ShrinkChicks. Nikki posts question boxes. You can write in a question. And if you have a longer Dear Em and Jen, you can message it to us, or you can go on shrinkchicks.com and you can send in a contact form. I was thinking about that the other day, that people might not know how to submit these questions. So follow us on Instagram and write in your questions to the question boxes when we post them.
Perfect. But let's start. Let's get to it.
Start it off.
Ready?
Okay. I'm ready.
Dear Em and Jen, first, I just want to say how amazing your podcast is. It's been such an eye-opening and informative piece of my journey. I've referenced things I've thought about, learned, and need to dig deeper in my therapy sessions. So much my therapist has listened to your podcast and told other clients of hers about it. You guys remind me of my own therapist. I look forward to every week's episode. Ugh, love you.
Thank you.
My husband and I have been together for 9 years, married 7. We have 2 kids. When we had our first 4 years ago, our world was rocked. Major problems we had before kids were magnified and became things I could no longer ignore. His communication is basically non-existent. He doesn't want to talk about things because he thinks he'll create an argument. When anything is brought up, he immediately gets defensive, feels like he's backed into a corner, and just pushes back about everything I say. Therefore, everything turns into an argument and fuels what he thinks. From your podcast episode about narcissistic personality disorder, we have fully realized and accepted that his mom is a narcissist. Knowing this has helped immensely in understanding more of how he grew up and why he responds the way he does. It has also led to going no contact after this and after his and hers very toxic relationship. I've been in therapy for 4 years. I've practiced in therapy about how I respond, and I've worked extremely hard to fix how I communicate and approach situations. We've talked about different ways to approach things with him. I have asked how I can approach topics better. I've tried so many different ways to communicate my needs and express things along with my partner. He prefers to have these conversations over text, which I absolutely hate because he can take longer to process. So I've done that. I've told him I want to talk about XYZ and can we talk about it at a certain time so he has time to think about it and mentally prepare and be ready for it. Nothing works. He either just gets mad at me and doesn't say anything when I give him space and I come back to it later. He states he doesn't remember what I said, which irritates me and I lose it. I have communicated my unmet needs and nothing has changed in years. I have tried different ways of communicating, even asking him what would make it easier, make him more comfortable to discuss things. No way has been successful. I talk and open up, he gets mad or stays completely silent. I try to talk about parenting and he just goes into defense and says I tell him how to parent and thinks he's so shitty as a parent. I've never said or implied anything like that. He thinks that having him open up and communicate more is changing who he is as a person, and why would I want to change him? I've tried telling him how you communicate is not your personality and people are supposed to change and grow. So I'm at a loss about how to get through to him about anything. I struggle with people pleasing anxiety, so this silence makes my mind go wild. I'm starting to become resentful and super frustrated. I've literally lost it at what else I can do, how else I can reach him, and I'm so lost and confused in what I can do to be heard. How else could I try to reach my partner to be heard? Thank you so much for all you do and appreciate you.
Wow. First, just want to acknowledge that when you're in a relationship and you feel like you're trying absolutely everything and you're not getting a lot back, how frustrating that can be. And it's understandable that you would reach this point of almost desperation. Um, One of the things I hear is that you're doing all of the work for the entire relationship. You're going to therapy, you're trying different ways of communicating, you're looking at yourself and what you can do differently. And what we know is that it takes two people to make a relationship work. And I think there's a question to ask yourself is how much does your partner want this to work? How much work are they putting into it? There was one thing I wanted to address, and that he said he would rather text, and that to be able to acknowledge that our partners communicate better through different mediums is really important. And if texting makes it easier for him to communicate and open up, then texting might be the way to go, or maybe
Yeah.
through email.
I think we talk about it in terms of a pursuer withdrawer dynamic, right? One of the things we know is to start with the withdrawer. So if you're the one who pursues and they're the one that withdraws, we have to start with getting him to come out a little bit. But I know that also sucks what I'm saying, because it's like, oh, great. Once again, I have to be the bigger fucking person. And that's when we talk about is the resentment, right? Like the jealousy that you might start to have towards your partner, that I'm the one who has to do all the work and they get to stay stagnant. And you might have to say, well, what's my breaking point here?
Yeah.
If none of this changes, how sustainable is this? Is it still sustainable? Is it okay? I just get my needs met elsewhere, or we figure out just how to co parent together or parallel parent, like whatever it is? Or is this truly not sustainable as a marriage anymore? And have you ever said that to your partner? I don't know if I'll be happy here. I don't know. Here's the way that it really does affect me long term. And here's my dreams I have for us. My dreams is that we can go out and talk and love each other and have emotional intimacy. And that's a really hard thing to do. And it sounds like, yeah, like Jed, I think you use the perfect word, that you start to hit desperation.
Yeah. And, I know you mentioned that your partner grew up um, with a narcissistic mother. And because of that, his model of relationships, right, might be that the only way to stay connected is to get defensive, is to shut down, is to react in the ways that he is still reacting, right? So he is taking certain survival, certain coping mechanisms that he learned from that relationship and bringing it into his relationship with you. Doesn't mean it's right, but it might be really terrifying for your partner to be able to, number one, look at the traumas that they've been through that have created that dynamic. And then number two, be able to work to change those patterns because of the pain that would have been caused if they were changed growing up. And so what you're seeing, it sounds like in his responses, is this like real, another, desperate need to protect himself, something that has built up for so many years. And there's a really difficult time bringing that down. And I also wonder what it brought up for your partner to have children after going through that experience himself with his own mother, right? Like what did that and yeah, the stuff might have been there, but when you have kids, what did that bring up for him? Is there a fear of, well, I'm going to turn into that? And what does that look like? You mentioned him saying something like, oh, well, you're calling me a shitty parent. I tell him how to parent and he thinks he's a shitty parent. So I just wonder if there's such a fear of, well, I don't want to be that. I don't want to turn into that. So anything that you say that makes me think that that's happening, it's like when someone points out any insecurity that we have,
Yeah.
right? It's so easy to get defensive about it because it's a fear that we already have about ourselves. And so I wonder what that brought up for him to become a parent himself and
Yeah.
what fear that brought up for him.
But I also think let's take someone who's like highly defensive, right? There is
Yeah.
a different way to communicate to them, which is that we have to get a new system as a marriage. We blame the system, not the person,
Yeah.
right? So, hey, me and you, since we've had kids, our whole fucking world's been rocked. And we have not developed a new system for our marriage and for our love for each other. And I guess we have to develop that now. And now maybe part of that system is the text messages, but
Yeah.
maybe another part is I need you to come towards me. And another part is that I'm not coming after you, I'm coming towards you.
The thing that I love that you're saying is that when you're approaching it, you're talking about it as a team. Like, listen, this isn't working the way that we're doing this
Yeah.
together, not you're doing this. Because as we said, it sounds like you're putting all this work in. So if you start approaching this like as a team, how do we work on this together? Like, I understand, I don't want to change you. However, I also want to make sure that like we're figuring this out. And being a parent is hard, right? It brings up all of your stuff. And so can you sit down and talk about it as like, let's talk about this as a team. And if you know, your partner, if there's any teams that your partner works in general, you can bring that in, right? Like at work, if someone came to you and said, hey, like let's work on this together, what does that look like for you? Like what's the best way to do that? Because I want to work on this as a team.
Yeah.
So to start to infiltrate your communication by saying we, and like what can we do together, what does this look like for us? I wonder what that would change or what that would be
Mhm.
like in your relationship to start to talk like that.
And you have to go to couples therapy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the bottom
That's, yeah.
line. That's
The other
that
thing
is
here. The other thing is this person said they've been together for 9 years and they've had a child, first child 4 years ago. You became a pandemic mommy.
yeah.
And a lot of us had very different experiences because even though your child was one ish when the pandemic hit, you didn't have the typical situation where mommy groups and different stuff like that. It was probably just difficult. And then it was just harder on your marriage. Becoming first time parents is incredibly difficult. Going through that during the pandemic is incredibly difficult. You guys went through this really difficult family transition of the cutoff with your mother in law. Your relationship has been through a lot, but also your relationship is 9 years old. Any 9 year old doesn't have the best skills in the world, right? So the developmental age of your relationship is still working through some shit. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that to have growing pains. So you gotta go to couples therapy. Figure out how you're gonna get them in and how you're gonna phrase this, but always leading with generosity. I know that you're fucking pissed. You're allowed to be fucking pissed. And still, we're gonna ask you to hold on to some of that pissedness till you can have generosity towards it to work towards the shared goal of keeping this family and marriage together. Cause I think that is your goal.
Yeah. And I would also say too, as the partner that is putting all this work in, give yourself a little bit of a break. That the over functioning is coming from this level of anxiety of like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to read every book. I'm going to go to therapy, which is wonderful. Like, it is
Mhm.
wonderful that you're doing that. But at the same time, you also have to take care of yourself. You have
Yeah.
to give to yourself in ways And if you are always in the state of heightened anxiety of what else can I do? What more can I do? And I understand that that's going to be there, but give yourself moments of breaks, give yourself some grace, give yourself some time to rest because you need that too. And in any relationship, it's so important for each partner to be able to take care of themselves, to hold on to parts of themselves so that they can give to the relationship. So I also want you to ask yourself, like, how much have you been giving to yourself? How much have you been taking care of yourself through this? Or is the focus only on, well, what do I do? How do I get him to talk? Focusing on him. And because in the end, there's a lot of that that might be out of your control. And so you're, if you could ground yourself and say, also at the same time, how do I take care of myself through this? If I'm not getting my needs met, how can I give to myself? How can I meet those needs myself? And then how can I come back to the relationship and say, how can we do this together as a team?
Very good. You ready for the next one?
Yep. You want me to read
Yeah.
it? Dear Em and Jen, I need advice. I'm almost 30, never been in a relationship, and just started dating a great guy. I have an avoidant attachment style, and I'm quick to find faults and avoid closeness. It's a huge deal that I'm still seeing this guy after a month and a half. How do I figure out what's preventing me from allowing this great guy to get close to me? I have childhood sexual abuse trauma, attachment struggles, and grew up in a family where I learned not to have needs, especially the need for romantic relationships, sex, and emotional connection. Where do I even start to unpack this? It feels so daunting and terrifying. It feels like it would just be easier to give up and live alone in the safety of my hyper independence. I have an amazing therapist that I love, but this just feels so hard. Any thoughts on how or where to start?
Mm. Oh man. All right. First of all, you got awareness and
Yeah.
insight on lock, babe.
Yes.
You have already had the first two steps down. You see it. You see exactly what's happening. The question is, how do you get the action? Right? So I'm going to tell you the worst thing that you want to hear. This is what I'm about to say is what you don't want to hear, which is you fucking hustle through it, which is you do the opposite of what your impulse tells you to do. Your impulse tells you to not call him, give him a call. Your impulse tells you to run away. What if you stayed?
Yeah.
Right? And how would you know what is automatic response versus what is intentional thought and choice?
Yeah.
Because the insight and awareness for this person is already off the charts amazing.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing as I was reading it. And I think that there's a huge common misconception that you have to be fully healed from trauma in order to have a successful relationship. And the fact of the matter is that healing can happen within the relationship. And but it can only happen if you allow yourself to open up slowly to it. And I know that that takes time, especially when you have gone through what you've gone through. But the awareness of it is really, number one, because as you start to share and unpack these things with your therapist, as you start to build safety in your relationship, you can also start to share if it feels comfortable for you where some of these traumas might come up, right? Where if you feel activated in a certain way, if there's something sexual happening and you're starting to feel triggered by past emotional sexual abuse, then for you to be able to communicate that to your partner and say like, hey, I need to take a break right now, like this is feeling really activating for me. Your partner can hear you, they can create safety for you. There are ways to create this safety and there are ways to do this healing within the context of the relationship. And it makes a lot of sense to me that every defense mechanism you have is saying, push this person away. They're not safe, right? Keep them away. But that sounds like an inner child talking of, I don't need anyone. I'm going to protect myself from ever being hurt again. But the fact of the matter is, as human beings, we all want connection, right? You wouldn't be looking for a relationship in general if that wasn't a real need, right? And so, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's family relationships, right? We all want this need and connection. But past traumas that we have gone through create this defense for us, keep us separated in our relationships. And so, it's beautiful that that's something you want to work through. It's also something that you get to look at on a case by case basis to say, what's being activated here, right? Like, what is this bringing up for me that I want to push him away right now, right? Am I fearful that he's going to hurt me? Am I fearful that I'm going to be hurt? Or is this feeling too vulnerable for me? Because you get to also say in the relationship, like, hey, this is feeling really vulnerable for me. And I recognize that when that happens, I do X, Y, and Z to push people away. And so I want to be very conscious of that because I really like you and I really like where this is going and I really want this to work. And I also want to express to you when that's happening. And I need to take a few minutes to take care of myself so that I can come back to the relationship and open back up to you. So the awareness of it on a case by case basis, minute by minute, of like the closer you get to this person, the more vulnerable it's going to feel, the more your defense is going to come up, the more you can communicate that in the relationship.
I really like what you're talking about in terms of like the inner child work around this,
Yes.
right? So the inner child is screaming, I don't need you, I don't need this, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But let's look at some of the parts of that. So one part of the inner child is saying that. Is there another part of the inner child? The one that doesn't have to be so quick to push away. And what is that inner child looking for? You said, I grew up in a family where I learned not to have needs, especially the need for romantic relationships, sex, and emotional connection. Those are actually just human needs. Yeah, human interest, right? Um, and so what would it be like to admit that you have those? What do you feel like that says about you to be human?
Mm.
Because part of being hyper independence and totally self-sufficient is to not be human.
Yeah.
What's so bad if I am?
And giving those things to yourself, right? That is reparenting your inner child for you to be able to acknowledge, oh, actually, did need that love. Like I did need someone to show up for me when I needed them. The more that you can acknowledge that that was important to you, the more that you can acknowledge that, yeah, you learned that hyper independence as a protection mechanism. And that the things that you once learned that you needed, you no longer need anymore. And for you to be able to give that to yourself to say, okay, I'm going to let this guard down. I'm going to let this person be there for me, is you also reparenting that inner child to say, you do have these needs and it's okay that you had these needs. And just because they weren't taken care of as a child doesn't mean that they can't be taken care of now.
Or we have to get to one more, Jim, before the
Oh,
episode's over.
wow.
Yes, I
Wow.
know. I know.
Time
So that's why I want
flies.
to make sure that we're getting through them because we're
Okay.
like, we're going to do these episodes. We're going to get to all the different.
Yeah. And then we just keep talking. We don't shut up. I have a lot to
If
say.
I ever have a memoir, I said it's going to be Just Stop Talking would be the name of my
Yes.
memoir. And that's what we need to do right now so we can actually get to these questions. Okay, so you ready for the next one?
Yes.
This is a very interesting one. I think people are going to be like this one. Dear Em and Jen, I love my partner dearly, but I don't enjoy being in public with them very often. My partner is often poor at holding conversation, distracted, and can raise their voice at minor inconveniences, and generally tends to get overwhelmed by their social anxiety environment. I find that my partner's social anxiety drains my energy, and I feel like I can't separate their responses in public from my own enjoyment. In private, my partner is much more relaxed, and we can maybe have some really in depth conversations and enjoyment. I feel responsible for their experiences, but I'm just trying to stop. I try to go out on my own and it's great, but I'd love to enjoy being in public with my partner. I'm trying to decide if this is something to work on or just let go. Most importantly, I love to have a date with them in public and have a more relaxed experience of something new together, but it really has never happened how I wish it would. How can I address this? How can I enjoy myself when my partner has extreme anxiety? Is it okay to remove social outings from your relationship? If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Thank you for all you do, you two beautiful souls. So, a few different questions. I want to make sure we answer their exact questions.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start with, if you were in my shoes, what would you do?
Okay. So the thing that I think is really important and something that I think is I have learned over time is to drop your expectations about what your partner should be and accept who they are. And I think that that is a huge learning game when you get into a relationship is that we all enter into a relationship with specific expectations around this is what I want my relationship to look like. This is how it's going to look. This is what my partner is going to do. We're going to do these social things. And so I think when you start to really get to know someone, when you start to really get to know your partner, you start to realize that there are a lot of expectations that you may have had going into the relationship that they don't fit in, right? And your relationship doesn't end up that way because your partner, no matter what, will not fit into that box that you've created, that you've probably created over time for a long period of time, looking at movies, looking at friends, looking at your parents' relationship, whatever it is. And so the thing that I would say is to start to look at your own expectations around your relationship, what your relationship should look like, and how your partner should be. Um, that sounds like you're in a bit of a contemplation stage of, is this something I should let go? And should I say, like, okay, it's okay for us to not have these social things that I expected, right? I really like the time that we have when it's just the two of us. Um, and that on the other hand of it, as you keep trying to pull your partner into these social situations, it ends up being very anxiety provoking for the both of you. So you very much get to decide what your relationship looks like. The two of you get to decide that together. It is absolutely okay that you spend time together at home and maybe you go out on your own and you're getting that fulfillment. And maybe your partner doesn't need that. And that's okay. And so the question for you, I would say, is that essential for you in order to maintain your relationship that your partner can go out socially? Is that so important to you? Is that something that genuinely is going to fulfill you in the relationship? Because if that's something that's going to be really hard for you to not have, then it might be something to really question within the relationship.
Well, she said, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? You'd probably be hard for you to answer that because this is your dream person that
Yeah,
you don't go
it's
out and
really,
meet
yeah, I'd be like, great, let's hang at home.
forever.
Like,
You are the.
is this,
Is this about
my
you?
husband's writing it?
Did your husband write this in about you, actually?
Yes, very, very possible. I
But
mean,
I think,
I can fake it,
yeah,
like
you
I'm
can.
really gonna, but
But I
yeah,
think
maybe.
that's the thing is this person's also talking about how their reactivity towards it, right?
Yes.
So here's the thing. This person who wrote it, you're openly admitting um that I feel like I can't separate their responses in public from my own enjoyment, right? So you're openly admitting that you're triggered by this shit.
Yeah.
So here's the other thing I would say. What's activating you? I would ask you to actually look a little bit deeper as well of like what's so activating. Are you worried that people are looking at you? Are you worried about what it says about you? Right, like, you know, like I would be interested in how like this brings up this activation for the person who wrote in. Because in some ways I think about it like at the beginning, you have to find what works for you, right? So I'm even thinking about I struggled a lot leaving the house with my daughter when I became a mom. I still get anxious. We're supposed to go to the zoo this weekend, and I'm already anxious about taking her. Right. I'm worried about something that's gonna happen. I'm worried if she's gonna have a meltdown. I look like a horrible mom, right? Like all this stuff. Like I can have those stuff. And at the beginning, it stopped me from going places. But you start to say, like, okay, I don't want to never leave my house. So I have to find something that works. So at the beginning, I only took my daughter to like breweries because they were already loud and nobody gave a fuck. And it was like already kind of messy,
Right,
right? Like
right, right.
very,
And like
very
it's like adults are having breakdowns. Not just
right.
kids, but
But
also
they were like
adults.
always in like pretty big warehouses. Sound
Yes.
was a little different. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I found certain ways. So the thing I would also say to my partner is, hey, one, this is what's happening for me, and I'd like to find a way to do it. What is a better environment for you? Could we start something else? What works for us?
Yeah. I would also say, what's the aftermath? Like, yeah, as you were asking the question of what is this like for you? Like, what anxieties is it bringing up for you? Like, is after you go out into a social situation, like, what happens at home after with your partner? Like, how are you guys communicating through it? Is it just that you feel his anxiety when you're out and then you come back home and it's fine? I just would want to know what the aftermath is and like
Yeah.
how that ends up affecting the relationship moving forward. or is it just what's happening at this social event?
Yeah.
I was
But I
also
mean,
thinking, like,
mhm.
can you find secluded places to do? Where do you live, right? Do you
Yeah,
live in
we
a
don't know yet.
city? If you live in a city, can you go into the suburbs and, like, have a little picnic? I feel like there, maybe not in the cold weather if you're in cold weather, but like, are there ways? And maybe you can talk about this of like, I really enjoy spending time with you. I want to spend time with you out, but are there secluded places that we can go to that feel less overwhelming for you?
I'm also wondering, right, you're talking about your partner's social anxiety. Would they label it that?
Ooh.
Does your partner know they have social anxiety? What does your partner label this as? Is this an
Is-
open conversation you both have?
Right. Oh, great question. Right. Like,
I'd be
have you ever said this? And does your
yeah.
partner, I mean, listen, I'm not going to diagnose, but like, does your partner have ADHD?
And how overstimulated do they
I
get,
mean,
right?
yeah, because that sounds like a definition.
Like, can your partner go have a wonderful time going on a hike? But if you ask them to go into a busy, crowded restaurant on a Saturday night, is that very different, right? Like, so like, what are the things? And that's what I mean. Like, how do you work within? But I think that's very hard to do if there's not open communication around it.
Like, I really struggled in college, in malls, like if I would go to malls or when they were really crowded, before I
Mhm.
knew that I had ADHD, I would have labeled it as anxiety
Yeah.
but I was simply overstimulated by my environment.
Hmm.
And since I figured out that it was ADHD, it has completely changed my narrative about myself, my understanding of what's happening for me. And so it also might be important for your partner to figure that, if they want to, right, to figure out like what's going on there, because it is really common with ADHD to be overly stimulated in
Hmm.
environments like that where it just feels like overload and you can't pay attention, and it really affects your nervous system. And so that's what I would say too, is that I wonder if there's something else besides just social anxiety going on.
Yeah. Hmm. All right. And that's it for today's episode.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you
but
so much for listening.
hey, we have more. We have part two of this. Don't
Oh
worry,
yeah,
coming
we have
up.
part two.
Dear Em and Jim, more questions. Of this part two coming on. We're happy you spent today with us. Hey, have a great rest of your week. We will talk to you soon. Don't forget to always rate, review, subscribe, follow on Apple Podcast. We always ask you to check us out at ShrinkChicks on Instagram and all the other places, shrinkchicks.com. Buy our merch. We have some great merch. It's getting cold outside. We have really great sweatsuits. You have to go check them out, shrinkchicks.com/merch. We have an amazing journal on Amazon. You can do Shrink Chicks journal, write that into Amazon. And if you're listening to this and you're like, you want to know what? I could do a little bit more depth. I could do a little individual work. We would love to connect you with one of our amazing clinicians at the therapy group at thetherapygroup.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We're just so goddamn lucky we get to do this as part of our jobs, right?
So lucky.
So don't forget that to grow yourself, you got to know yourself. We'll see you